from superhero to demonization. Up until 1883, cannabis sativa, hemp, was the largest agricultural crop in the world. It had thousands of uses and products. The majority of fabric, lighting oil, medicines, paper, and fibre came from hemp. The first cannabis law to exist in the United States was actually a law ordering farmers to grow hemp, which was enacted in Jamestown Colony in Virginia in 1819. Benjamin Franklin used it to start one of America's first paper mills, and the first 2 copies of the Declaration of Independence were written on cannabis hemp paper. Up until the 1800s, most of the textiles in the United States were made with cannabis hemp. 50% of medicines marketed in the last half of the 19th century were made from cannabis sativa, marijuana. Even Queen Victoria used the resin extracts from cannabis marijuana to alleviate menstrual cramps. In the 1850s, the US Census registers approximately 8,400 hemp plantations, producing at least 2,000 acres each. And also by 1850, cannabis marijuana had made its way into the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is an official public standards setting authority for all prescription and over-the-counter medicines. And this listed marijuana as treatment for numerous afflictions, including neuralgia, tetanus, typhus, cholera, rabies, dysentery, alcoholism, strange, opiate addiction, strange, anthrax, leprosy, incontinence, gout, convulsive disorders, tonsillitis, insanity, excessive menstrual bleeding, and uterine bleeding, among others. Even George Washington, the father of the United States of America, grew cannabis as his main crop at Mount Vernon. So, what makes cannabis so powerful that it was banned in the US and many other countries around the world? The funny thing about cannabis hemp, as you know, is that even though you can't get a high from it, as it contains no THC, cannabis hemp and cannabis marijuana, which contains THC, were treated as being the same plant and subjected to the same laws and demonization. There were some very sinister goings-on behind the scenes involving rich government backers who had a vested interest in seeing paper being produced from their own trees and not from the hemp farmers. Surprise, surprise. In 1933, the cannabis plant in all forms became the target of government control. Sensationalistic stories, which were mainly racially targeted, linked violent acts, playing the devil's music, being disrespectful, were linked to cannabis consumption by minority communities. The church even released a film called Reefer Madness, and many of the outlandish stories appeared in newspapers published by William Randolph Hearst. Now, Hearst had financial interests in the lumber and paper industries, and he may, inverted commas, have sought to eliminate competition from hemp. The first laws against cannabis in the United States were passed in border towns with Mexico. William Randolph Hearst, as I've said before, was an up-and-coming newspaper tycoon who owned 28 newspapers by the mid-1920s. Hearst had recently invested in thousands of acres of woodland with which he would produce his newspapers from wood pulp rather than the hemp plant. And so Hearst then dropped the words cannabis and hemp from his papers and began a propaganda campaign against it, referring to all cannabis plants, even what the farmers were producing, as marijuana. This ended up leading to a law in the form of a tax act, the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act. A tax that would not only impact cannabis marijuana, but also cannabis hemp and cannabis medicines. It's speculated that hemp's potential for an abundance of new products was going to be in direct competition with other sources, now you know who, and led to the eventual downfall of all forms of cannabis and decimated the hemp farmers' industry. Congratulations, Mr. Hearst. By the end of 1936, all 48 states had enacted laws to regulate cannabis plants, whether they were hemp or marijuana. The decline of its use in medicine was speeded up by the development of aspirin, morphine, and then other opium-derived drugs, all of which helped to replace cannabis in the treatment of pain and other medical conditions in Western medicine. At the time, a popular magazine called Popular Mechanics, doesn't exist anymore, they published an article about 6 months after the release of the Act promoting new hemp harvesting machines entitled The New Billion-Dollar Crop, in which cannabis hemp was touted as being able to produce more than 5,000 textile products from its thread-like fibre, and more than 25,000 products from its cellulose, ranging from dynamite to cellophane. I bet you didn't know that. Its superiority as a source for paper was also becoming known, especially with the development of the hemp processing equipment. So these poor farmers who grew hemp because the law stated they should, were then investing in machines that were being developed specifically for farming. And then in the background of this, you had these rich tycoons, totally financially motivated, making sure that the product was demonized and persuading the government to bring in laws making it illegal. So it's just a terrible situation. Now, with the new Marijuana Tax Act that came into place, the only way you could grow cannabis hemp was by buying a special issue cannabis stamp. And here's an example of one. But the government weren't giving them out to anyone. And so, in effect, all forms of cannabis became illegal. And things stayed that way until World War II, when the government decided that it was once again a good thing and produced a video called Hemp for Victory. And by the time the war was over, they decided to change their mind again. Congress recognised that the cannabis plant had been made illegal amidst claims it made people violent. And what they realised was that, in fact, it had the complete opposite effect if they were using the cannabis with THC in, and made them pacifists. However, there's always a twist on this. They decided to declare that the communists would use it to weaken Americans' will to fight, and they voted to keep the law and make cannabis, whether hemp or marijuana derived, illegal for the exact opposite reason that they had outlawed it in the first place. You couldn't make it up. However, the journey with this amazing plant was taking another turn, because from behind the scenes there were scientists and even the US government itself working on patents and working with the plants. Read on for more excitement.